But Naomi's like, no, you guys stay here. This is crazy. Don't come with me. You're leaving your support system to come to a place where you don't have one. Stay here. The ladies, these two daughters-in-law basically have a choice. Am I going to go or stay? One of them, Orpah, chooses to what? Stay. She's not going to go. She's sticking around there back in the homeland of Moab. But one, whose name bears the book, or is on the book, her name's Ruth, she decides to what? She's going to go, and she goes, and the whole crux of that thing was that she was going based on her faith in Naomi's God. Naomi, pretty low on the faith scale. She was not thankful, not grateful. She was pretty bitter, despondent, pitiful. But Ruth, even in the midst of all of that, even being coached by Naomi to go home, says, you know what? Where you go, I'll go. Where you stay, I'll stay. I'm going to die where you die, and your God will be my God. And she basically puts a stake in the ground. She says, I'm going to follow your God even if you don't. That's a pretty faithful woman right there, isn't it? So they head back to Bethlehem. The second sermon I preached to you, Ruth wakes up in the morning and says to Naomi, hey, I'm going to go out in the fields. There was a law there in Israel that basically said if you were a widow or a foreigner, and Ruth was both, that you could go, and so that everybody had enough food to eat, you could go and basically pick grain for yourself off of the corners of the fields as the harvest was coming. And so Ruth, had learned this and said, hey, I'm going to go take advantage of this, government program, and I'm going to get my food. And Naomi's like, whatever, go. And so Ruth goes out, and she had, basically said, I pray that I find favor in some man, and he'll let me do this at his field. Well, just so happens, we learned that week, that Ruth found the field of this guy Boaz. We learned that week that there's no such thing as just so happens. If you haven't heard this before, for a follower of Christ, someone who believes by faith that God is sovereign, there's no such thing as luck, good or bad. There's just providence in what God ordains for our lives. There's no such thing as coincidence. He orders our steps. He's numbered the hairs on our heads. Some of us, that's going to be easier. But He knows everything about us. He knows everything about the future and the past. He has everything in the scope of His knowledge. And so there's no such thing as luck or chance. And so He orders Ruth's steps, and Ruth goes to a field that's owned by this guy Boaz. Boaz is a great Christian man, and he's single. And so single Ruth and single Boaz kind of match up in this field, and Boaz says, hey, I don't remember hiring this girl. He asks his foreman, he says, who is this lady? And the foreman says, oh, that's this girl Ruth. She's a Moabitess. She came over with Naomi, and basically says, she's been here all morning. And I got to tell you, I'm really surprised at her work ethic. I mean, she's really been busting it. And it says there that Boaz went to Ruth and said, hey, Ruth, I don't want you to go to any other fields. You come here and you take everything you need from this field. And he says, I'm going to provide for you. And where we're starting today in verse 10 is Ruth's response to that kindness that Boaz gives her. Now I'm going to give you the blanks right off the bat. Can I do that? Guys in the booth, can you do that? Here we go. Here come the blanks in case I don't get to them, because I'm just going to riff after this. Here we go. Ready? First one's this. We're going to learn today that God provides for those who have provided. God provides for those who have provided. I'm going to talk to you about that right off here in the first part. Secondly, we're going to learn that God often provides overwhelmingly for those who have provided. And we're going to talk about the lavishness, the lavish nature of God's grace. And the last thing we're going to learn is that it's good for all of us when God provides to be grateful. It's important, it's central to what it is to walk in faith, to be grateful when God provides. Now let me teach you the book of Ruth. Here we go. It says in verse 10, at this being Boaz's provision, at this she bowed down with her face to the ground. All right, they could have just stopped at bowed down, but this is one of those bow downs that put your nose in the mud bow down. You with me? I mean, Ruth is way down there. She's not even lifting her head, and she exclaims, why have I found such favor in your eyes that you notice me, a foreigner? I mean, culturally, you got to understand, this does not happen. The boss doesn't show up at the field, and the boss certainly doesn't single out a foreign widow who's off there gleaning, the perfectly good grain that he could be using towards his bottom line. He doesn't bring her to the center of the day and say, hey, I'm going to provide for you. I mean, it's blowing Ruth's brain out here. She just cannot understand why this is happening. She's in this position of humility, bowed down. You know that's the position that we're meant to walk through life with in our relationship with our God? We're supposed to be in awe of Him, amazed by His grace. That's why they named the song that. We're supposed to have our faces down in just abject, awe and surprise at all that He gives us. But if you're like me, you just take God for granted a lot of times. He's supposed to do this. Of course He loves me. Look at me. Right? That's how we can get with Him. We get all cocky. But Ruth's not doing that. In this situation, she, unlike many of us, is in full understanding of her position in this play. A lot of times we think we're better than we are. Everybody knows that we're not, right? Everybody in here is a sinner, saved by grace, if that's your position in life. Nobody merits the favor of God. Ruth gets that, and she's on her face. Boaz says to her, he says, I've been told about what you've done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, how you left your father and mother and your homeland and came to live with the people you did not know before. He says, listen, Ruth, everybody's told me about you. I'm so honored to meet you. I am amazed by your grace that you, as a Moabite, as this woman who had no family ties except, through marriage to this girl. I mean, you've taken a member, and he hasn't said this yet because he hasn't revealed it, but you've taken a member of my family. Naomi and Boaz are kin. He says, you have lavished grace on her. You've walked her through this time. You've gotten her back to Bethlehem as an old woman. He says, I just don't know what else to do except to do what I'm doing for you. Your grace has inspired my grace. And can I just share with you that this is a picture of what happens when we serve others selflessly and God sees it. There's an old adage that's thrown out. God helps those who, okay, just so you know, not biblical. Not in here. I don't know who coined it, but he didn't read it in here. We can argue, certainly, and we talked about it the second week of this series, that God, when messes come, wants us to do something. We shouldn't be paralyzed by fear and depression. We should go out and do whatever we can. I agree with that. But what that saying entails or implies is that, it's karma. We do and God does for us. That's not the scenario. It's not our situation with our God. He honors our faith, not our works. Our works flow from our faith. And so it's not like you can go out there and work, do, serve, and then manipulate God into making your life better. That's not a scriptural tenet. It's not in there. But there's a preponderance of scriptural evidence. I mean, there's just a ton of stories in here of how God goes and blesses those who are busy serving others and not looking for anything in return. So the saying should be not, God helps those who help themselves. The saying should be, God helps those who help others and don't care if they get anything in return. I've just coined a new phrase. Use it at work and in play, wherever. Yeah, God helps those who helps others and don't have any concern for what they get in return. I mean, go to your homes. Picture your children in those glimmering moments where the Holy Spirit comes upon them, and all of a sudden, they're doing the dishes without being told. I mean, you walk into the kitchen and you're just about ready to start yelling for someone to come and do these dishes, knowing that they're there, but all of a sudden, your 12-year-old is there laboring at the sink, loading that dishwasher up. What happens to you? I'll tell you what happens to you. You start blubbering like a little baby because your heart is so turned to the good. Your soul is so lifted by this scene of selfless service. I mean, all you want to do is walk up to them. You ever done this? You catch your kid doing something great, and you walk up to him, and you're like, thank you. And the kid's like, dude, it's just the dishes. You're going crazy. But you're just so excited to see them doing something without being told, something that, benefits other people, and they don't expect anything in return. Does anybody have those kids that I'll mow the lawn? I'm like, whatever, you'll mow the lawn. Get your carcass out there before I mow you. I mean, we shouldn't train our kids to do that. That's another sermon. Anyway,